Welcome one and all. It's time for another explosive, spicy, tingling, finger-licking good, tender, succulent, juicy and moist tournament report. This time, Warhammer Age of Sigmar featuring Bastian, as you can see there, with his crazy flaming eyes, which are not represented in my paint job. That's actually clever Photoshop work there, causing that effect. So if you feel ripped off already, feel free to turn off the video instantly. So this tournament, Rum and Rumble 2, is my first Age of Sigmar singles tournament. 2,000 points. Obviously I'm taking Stormcast. That's the only army I've got that can actually reach that point level at the moment. And let's get rid of the thumbnail here so you can actually see. There is game one laid out, so I'll go through my list first of all and any interesting features of the tournament. So this took place at the TSN Arena, I hope that's correct, the home of the Honest Wargamer, fellow internet celebrity in the wargaming realm. And there are 5 games over 2 days, and the terrain is very clear at this particular venue. It's the same venue as the doubles tournament that I took part in a month or 2 ago, was it? A little while ago now. But the terrain, very, very clear, very obvious where pieces of terrain end, and then they have little markers on them that let you know what kind of terrain it is, whether you can garrison it, whether it'll grant cover, whether it'll obscure view, and so on. So for my list, let's go into some close-ups and I'll talk through each unit as they pop up here. And then after that I'll tell you about my battalions and such. So, if anyone's watching this live, by the way, feel free to pop into the chat and leave some comments. We've got 5 Liberators, can't leave home without them. And there you go. We've got Long Strike Crossbows, unit of 3. We've got Bastian, we've got the Lord Imperatant. Now, the Lord Imperatant has the Arcane Tome, he's the General, he has Master of Magic so he can reroll spells, and I've also given him Flaming Weapon just in case he wants to buff himself up before getting into combat, but the main reason he's in the army is so that Annihilators coming down from the heavens can be set up 7 inches away from the enemy instead of 9 inches. So that can be quite a big deal. We've got 2 Concussors. I've resisted the temptation to chop the hammerheads off and put spearheads on instead to turn them into fulminators, because I just like the hammers. 5 more Liberators. And since this is a Hammers of Sigmar list, then the Concussors are also battle line in addition to the Liberators. We've got the Knight Incantor, who I decided to try out a spell on. So she's got Starfall, which can prevent enemy units from piling in. So we'll see if that actually comes up at all. We've got Jack in the chat. Hello there. Spreads the word hey across 2 messages to make the chat look busier than it actually is. That's very kind of you. We've got 2 units of 3 Grandhammer Annihilators, who are obviously the big death machines in this army. Then we've got 3 Annihilators with shields, who are the slightly less of a death machine. And the fact that I just don't own that many Grandhammers, and probably never will, means that these guys can still find their way in at 2,000 points. And you never know, Grandhammers might get nerfed in the future, so I'm not totally crippled by having my entire army made up of them. So, let's go through my battalions. So I've got the Command Entourage with my 3 heroes. I've got Bastian, the Imperatant, and the Knight Incantor. So that allows me to take an extra Holy Commands. The 2 Holy Commands I've gone for Call for Aid, which was going to allow me to bring back a unit of Liberators when it's killed, near to one of my heroes. And I've also gone for Unleash Thy Hatred, which gives a nice little combat boost to a unit once per game, which is pretty much always going to be the Grandhammer Annihilators, if I get my way. And I've also taken the Expert Conquerors Battalion, which contains the 2 units of Liberators, so they'll count for triple on objectives. And I've also taken Bounty Hunters with the Grandhammer Annihilators, both of those, and the Concussors in case there are any Galatian veterans about. So they can do some extra damage to them. And the only units I've got in my army that are classed as Galatian veterans would be the Liberators. So, I believe that's everything. Over my Triumph I took Inspired, in case that comes up, and Grand Strategies, which you have to pick at the start of the tournament, or beforehand when you submit your list anyway, and then you know what everyone's Grand Strategy is as well, so it's not something that's sprung on you at the end. And I chose Take What's Theirs, which a lot of people seem to take. It's the kind of thing you want to do. You want to be getting into your opponent's half anyway to fight them, so why not take that? Which means you get your Grand Strategy if you have more units in your opponent's setup area than they have, in their territory, as it's worded in this game. So, in the first game, I'm up against Ogres, or whatever they're known as now. This particular one, are these I assume these are Beast Claw Raiders, are they? I'm going to guess that's right. So, in fact, you know what I can do? I was going to forget the names of all my opponent's units in every single game. However, this tournament is on an app that's got all the lists in it from the games. So I'm just going to dive in there now and have a look at my opponent's list. So let's see. It's Ogor Mawtribes, and the Mawtribe is Underguts. And also Take What's Theirs and Inspired as the Grand Strategy and Triumph. So I can actually, this is crazy, I can actually get the names of the units right for a change. So, let's see. Leaders. There is a Frostlord on a Stonehorn in there somewhere, who is hiding behind the terrain there. That's a bit of a big beastie. There is Big Drog Fort Kicker, who is the Warlord, and I assume that that is the Gargant, because look at the price of it, 525 points, that must be the Gargant. There you go, so big old beastie there. There are 3 units of 2 Frost Sabers. So there's 2 over there, 2 there, and 2 on the other end. And then there are 3 Iron Blasters, which I think we saw in this picture, behind the Gargant, who is protecting them. 3 Iron Blasters, and what else have we got in here? Also a Butcher, who I believe is right next to this big cooking pot, which gives out some bonuses. And there is also a character down there as well. So I think that is the General, which is a Hrothgorn. Or is that the Tyrant? Let's see. Which one's which? One of them, I think that one must be Hrothgorn then. That starts off the table. And then this one must be the Tyrant. So, the scenario we're playing here, and I can tell you that as well, the battle plan, because I've got my General's Handbook right here. So I can tell you precisely which battle plan has 4 objectives down the middle like that. If I just go through every single page, it's going to be there because I may have forgotten to take pictures of it. So I think this one's the Mighty and the Cunning. So 4 objectives, pretty standard scoring. This tournament, by the way, did not use the bonus victory points for killing Galatian veteran units. It was deemed to be silly, so that's been taken out. So you score a victory point for controlling an objective, another one if you control 2 or more, another one if you control more than your opponent, and 2 for each battle tactic that you complete, and then 3 for the grand strategy. And that is that. So what is my plan here? Because I've got the Annihilators off the table, all 3 units, everyone else on the table. So what I'm thinking is 1 unit of Annihilators coming down per turn, really close to the enemy because of the Lord Imperatant, 7 inches away, splashing some mortal wounds around, charging in, doing big damage, and then hopefully not dying, but they probably will. And then next turn bring another one down within 7 inches, because the last thing I want here, Annihilators are pretty vulnerable, especially the Grandhammers, but even the shield ones, they're not exactly mega survivable. They've got really good armor save obviously, but they don't have that many wounds, so any mortal wounds or lots of attacks, they're very, very susceptible to death from those. So if I bring down multiple units and they fail their charges, they're just sitting out in the open, waiting to be shot at, basically. So if I bring down one at a time, keep the others as a threat, and it'll also, the longer you've got them up in the heavens, even though they're not contributing actively to the game, they're also forcing your opponent to think about the fact they might come down, and that might force them to set up in a certain way. So obviously, all the meat in my opponent's army is right in the centre here. So what I would like to do is punch through this Gargant to get to the juicy centre, which would be these iron blasters there. So how can I get rid of this? What I'm going to attempt is Bastian's lightning from the heavens. This is the perfect target for it. 35 wounds, so he's going to roll 35 dice. And any 6s does a mortal wound to it. So it's the perfect opponent for Bastian for that ability. And then I've got some shooting, and plopping down some annihilators can do mortal wounds, charging in to do mortal wounds, and then hitting it with hammers. So I'm hoping to kill that, basically. That's my primary target, first of all, and we'll see what happens after that. So, on to the first turn then. And all-out defense, I put that on Bastian because he was getting shot at in the first turn. You can see there has been some movement from the Ogors. Not a huge amount, just to get within shooting range. So Bastian does take a couple of wounds from shooting, actually. And shooting him isn't the worst idea, because he's not going to kill anyone. So he's not going to get those wounds back until next time, if at all. So that's how it looks. We've got these frost sabers have moved up a bit, but I don't have a great deal that can actually chase them. And I'm not that crazy about putting resources into taking them out yet, because I want my long strikes to shoot at something more important over here. The positioning of these units with the big Gargant means that I can drop annihilators in here and splash mortal wounds onto both units. You have to be within 10 inches to do so. And there we go. So in my turn, I've moved up these Liberators to take this objective. Oh, you can see this here. This is an ogre trap of some description. So what that's done, it means that any units moving on that are in peril, basically. So you don't want to move. So it's lucky the long strikes don't want to do any moving. And you'll notice the Gargant is dead. That's because everything went to plan. So Bastian, with his lightning from the heavens, did a decent number of wounds to it. I shot it with the long strikes, annihilators came down, plopped mortal wounds onto it. They also plopped mortal wounds onto some of the iron blasters here as well. They charged in, did more mortal wounds, and then they struck first, and they just killed it without the concussors and Bastian even having to join in. So even though they all made charges into it, they didn't even get to fight. So you'll notice Bastian has got a wound back there, so that must have been a bit of heroic recovery there. And the Mystic Shield on the concussors will at least go through to next turn if my opponent gets it. So, yep, there we go, thumb up. You can actually see a thumb wound there, and I can reveal that was from a 1mm drill bit. So, drilling through a bit of a miniature and overestimating the thickness of it. So it went straight through to the other side and into the thumb. But thankfully, because it's a tiny drill bit, it's only a very, very small stabby wound, so it's not super annoying like a big slice would be. Okay, and then I've got Liberators have just moved up a bit. Oh yeah, by the way, for this first game, some of the rules were being played incorrectly, as I found out later. So you're not supposed to be able to Mystic Shield twice in the same turn. Even though I've got two casters, you can only cast it once with a caster, and then the other one can't do it, apparently. So that is not legal. So one of these units shouldn't have it, which was obviously going to be the Liberators if anyone had to miss out. And my battle tactic was for these Liberators, I think, to hold an objective. So that's going to be successful. And I call that a very good opening to the game. However, this next turn, if I don't get the priority roll, what's likely to happen? These guys probably shoot down at least the Annihilators could go down quite easy. if I get the priority roll, the Iron Blasters are in for a bad time, because more Annihilators are going to be plopped in, and then all my hard-hitting stuff will be on the table and in their face. And if I can get rid of them, suddenly my opponent barely has anything to threaten me with. Just a bunch of heroes and this big fella at the back there. And then lots of these terrible saber cats. So, there's the victory points. We both got our battle tactics, maximum points for the first round. I say maximum, but there are ways you can get more than that if you accomplish certain battle tactics with Galatian veterans. But we weren't in a position to do that yet. And look at that. So I get the priority roll. So I've got a double, and this means that I've got Liberators charging into the... This is on the left flank. Liberators going after the Frost Sabres, killing one of them. The Lord Imperator puts Flaming Weapon on himself, and it's worth doing because you never know, he might fight before my next hero phase. These Liberators make a beeline for this area here, and they don't manage to chase down or murder those guys, but they're happy just chilling because their superior numbers are going to give me that objective. In the middle, you'll notice that 2 of the Iron Blasters are dead. It's because Annihilators came in, mortal wounds splashed out, both Annihilator units charged, which is doing mortal wounds as well. Bastian got in, Concussors got in here. One of them's been killed, as you can see. The other one was able to do some wounds in retaliation to this one. So 2 of them are dead, one of them's heavily wounded, and some wounds have been done via the mortal wound splash onto this butcher as well. So it's looking very, very promising at this stage. Am I on track for my first singles competitive Age of Sigmar win in my first game of that nature? It's looking good. And my battle tactic was... Can I even read what that says? Gaining momentum, I think that is. So that's where you have to hold more objectives than your opponent and kill a unit. And I think I've picked this Iron Blaster that was here, and it's dead. So I've got my battle tactic. And another 5 points. Nice. So, onto my opponent's turn. And I put Finest Hour on Bastian in case he gets charged by anything nasty. So it'll give him the extra save, allowing me to use all-out defense on either him in case there's a lot of rend, or just somebody else. And I think my opponent also picked Gaining Momentum, by the looks of it. So, what's going on here? Oh no, this one's mine was picked. I was taking a picture of the battle tactic I got, I think. So there's no need for me to squint. I could have just waited for the very considerate zoomed image. So my opponent's gone for this one's mine. Pick a unit, and I believe it's this one, and that would be the general there, who's going to try and kill the concussor. Or finish it off at least, because it can be shot first maybe. And the big lad on the stone horn. I'm just going to bring up that list again on my phone. So, let's have a look here. Gone onto the wrong page now. Okay, there we go. So, the Frost Lord on Stonehorn. Yeah, there we go. I can get the names right, can't I? Moves into the middle here. And it just wants to get in the fight, really. I don't think it minds who it fights, but there's a lot of murder hammers here. The concussor does get killed, so the battle tactic is going to be achieved. However, this guy is going to bring in lots of my units into combat, who are going to hopefully smash some serious face. But the ogres do hit hard as well, of course. So, let's have a look. So you can see one Annihilator's disappeared so far. And this hero, who was someone there, yeah, so the enemy general, Bastian, smacks that down, which is nice. And my opponent, actually, did he actually fail to do the battle tactic? Because maybe the wrong unit killed the concussor. That's entirely possible, because it looks like only 2 victory points have been dished out there. So I'm in the lead. Only lost... Did I lose 2 or 3 Annihilators? looks like just one actually. One Annihilator has been killed as a result of all that combat. So really, this is where Annihilators want to be. In combat, around the enemy, ready to smack things around. Looking very healthy for me. You can see the other big cat over there was killed as well. So this area is totally mine. The other ones have run off down here somewhere. Running away from Liberators, which is always embarrassing. And it's looking very healthy. Onto my turn. Whose turn 3 is it? I think my opponent actually gets the priority roll here. These pictures are upside down, obviously. So an eye for an eye. And let's see. Is it my turn actually? Let's see. If the turns were quick, then I might have just taken all the pictures together. So yes, it was my opponent's turn. With an eye for an eye, trying to kill a unit. But, as you can see, didn't kill any of them. The Iron Blaster came down here, tried to shoot down the Imperatant. Stonehorn tried to kill the Annihilators. But look at that, each unit's got one model left. So, failing with the battle tactic again. Only a single point. And then on my turn 3, everyone's steaming in, killing big Stonehorn, killing the last Iron Blaster. These final group of Annihilators got dropped in to help out. Taking all the objectives, another 5 points, and I think the only thing left, I think there's some cats down there, and the enemies that were coming in from the table edge deployed in the corner down there to try and get their grand strategy, which was the same as mine, which is to have more units in my territory than I do. However, they couldn't do that because I was able to bring back units, running them. The Knight Incanter, the Imperatant, and these Annihilators were able to make it back before the end of the game. So, I took a picture of the final score sheet there. So you can see that I got 26 points. My opponent got 10. I didn't take pictures of the sheets after every game, by the way, because I forgot. Too bad. So, flying high after that resounding victory, we then move into round 2, where I'm obviously flying too close to the sun, and I come up against the Idoneth or Idoneth Deepkin. And I've got their list up here, and I can tell you that the battle plan is... Let me just find it in the book here, so I can let you know if there are any weird scoring conditions in this one. Some of them do have interesting extra nuggets. So I think this one is just the Prize of Gallet. I don't see any others with that objective set up. So I think that's the one. So, 1 victory point to control an objective, 1 if you control 2 or more, 1 if you control more than your opponent, 2 for a battle tactic. And so, this is the one where you have to activate the objectives. So, at the start of each battle round, after the players have determined who will take the first turn, the player who will take the second turn picks 1 objective on the battlefield to be activated. So, prior to that, they are not active. Just 1 becomes active each time. So there are 5, and obviously you get a small advantage there for going second. You can pick which one's going to become active at any given time, and then it stays active for the rest of the game for scoring purposes. So, in my opponent's list, you can see a lot of it there. Very nicely painted fishies. Let's have a look. What have we got here? So, the enclave for it is Iron Rack. I don't really know what that does. Take what's theirs and inspire to the same grand strategy and triumph that I chose. Leaders. Soul Scryer. Achailean King with Unstoppable Fury and an Arcane Tome. And also with Flaming Weapon on the Arcane Tome, so much like my Lord Imperatant there. Battle Line. There are 20 Namati Reavers, 10 Namati Reavers, and 6 Achailean Morsar Guard. There's no way I would have remembered any of these names without this handy aid, by the way. So I think all of the Mawtribes are off the table at the moment, and they teleport in later. And over there is the unit of 6 fish people, fish guard. And then there are 2 of the big shark units, which are Achillean alapexes instead of just sharks. 2 units of those, which we'll get close-ups of in a moment. And I think that's all of it. So it's only 1960 points, which is 10 less than me, so I'm not going to have my triumph in this one. It's a 3-drop army, mine is 9 drops, so I'm not going to be able to choose whether to go first or second in this one, because generally, if you're going to teleport, most of the time you probably want your opponent to go first, because that's going to encourage them to move. They can either stand there and accomplish nothing, or they can move out of their secure little bunker from the start and leave spaces for you to teleport into. But there are obviously ways of mitigating that, but in general, I think going second, there's usually more spaces for teleporting, in general. So what I got on the table here, I've got my Liberators, Bastian, my other heroes, the Concussors, and I've got my Long Strikes garrisoned inside here. Now, I'm not 100% sure whether you're supposed to be able to garrison in deployment, but they are anyway. If you can't, they could have just moved in there in turn 1 anyway, so it doesn't make much difference. So there's the enemy units that can come on later. All my Annihilators are in the heavens again. And in this game, what is my strategy going to be? You can see some of their very lovely sharks here. They are always a very attractive army, the Deepkin. But having never played against them before, I'm not entirely sure what to expect. And here's my layout there. So, I believe I had to take the first turn. My opponent forced me to go first, due to having less drops than me, so I didn't have any say in the matter. So everything's moving up a bit. And I dropped down some Annihilators to do some mortal wounds and charge into these guys. Unfortunately, they don't just delete the unit, which would have been nice. Sadly, they only kill 3 of them and then lose 2 and 2 and a bit by the looks of it. It seems like that one's wounded, so even with all-out attack. So, also figuring out that once they got in there, they probably, rather than all-out attack, maybe the Unleash Thy Hatred is the best option there. Although maybe they lost a model to... Did they lose one to Unleash Hell from the Sharks? They might have done. And because I was going to set off Unleash Hell anyway, I could have just charged into the Sharks. Or I could have brought down more units of Annihilators in the first turn, obviously. So the thing with the Deepkin, they seem to have an ability that changes each turn. So in the first turn, you can't shoot them unless they're within 12 inches. So the long strikes are kind of useless at the moment, and then they have a different ability later on. And in turn 3, at that point, all their units strike first in combat, I think. So with that in my mind, my plan is to try and fight things and kill things before turn 3 rolls around. Ideally, would be nice. But I don't want to throw everything out there and just leave it out in the open, like I was describing earlier, to be shot. Maybe that's wise sometimes, because you're not going to fail every 9-inch re-rollable charge, obviously. So it might be nice to get multiple units of Annihilators in at once. You can only have one lot of Unleash Hell per turn. So that's something to consider, I'm sure. One thing I kind of forgot to do here, because this objective here was the one that became active for the turn, chosen by my opponent, the Liberators could have just auto-run onto it. But I forgot to do that. So I'm not going to get maximum points for this round. And I also I think I did get the battle tactic, which is, or did I? I assume so. Yeah, because I'm still holding something for battle tactic purposes, which these still count even when they're not active for battle tactics, as far as I am aware. So that's why I did get some points. But I could have got my Liberators onto this quite easily. And you'll notice that they're on it now, in my opponent's turn. Look at that. All these archers have dropped down behind my lines. which is difficult to stop, but not impossible, because you can always spread out a bit in the back lines, but they've got a decent range on them as well, so they don't have to deploy near you to actually be a pain. Sharks coming in towards the Liberators. And so the shark is actually hoping to kill the Liberators. Oh no, so what happened was, let's see. The reason the Liberators are there is because the initial unit was killed. They were gunned down, and then because of my holy command, I was able to bring another unit on the objective to stop my opponent taking it, which I thought was a very nice move. So the replica of the unit appeared on the objective there. And because they're not part of the battalion, the replica unit, but because there's 5 of them touching it, they are worth more than this fish. So the Liberators have been killed, but they're back, is the gist of that. The final Annihilator is killed, and I'm regretting just sending in 1 unit there now, because those 3 are still alive and swimming. But I've got more to play with. So you'll notice that there's some shooting taking place into my heroes. The Lord Imperator is just killed, which is another reason that maybe I should have brought all the Annihilators down, knowing that my opponent would be able to deploy shooter units near my heroes and shoot them down. The 7-inch ability of the Imperator isn't going to come into effect anyway, so the Annihilators are going to have to deploy 9 inches away, which they could have just done in turn 1 anyway. So maybe that was a mistake, and the Knight Incanter has taken some wounds as well, but it's still alive, so it's still useful for dispelling. And all of these sharks and fish people, I think this is the general there. But all of them swim up and they're going to charge. Some wounds are done to the concussors. And I put all out defense on them, but I always mark wounds remaining on a model. I know it makes sense to put wounds taken onto a big model, because then it's easier to match it up with the damage chart. But when it comes to small stuff, I prefer to have wounds remaining on it. That's how I always used to do it, because you don't put anything on them, and then once they've taken 1 wound, you then put like 1 below their amount. That's how I've always done it, and maybe I should switch to doing it the other way, because I know a lot of people prefer it the other way. What do you think? Let me know in the chat or the comments. Which way round do you put the wounds? As long as you make it clear to your opponent, I suppose it's not that big of a deal. But yeah, maybe I should switch so it's brought in line with how people usually do it for their monsters. Let me know. And look at that. Guess who was there? Bastian. He's dead. Gets eaten by fish. Womp womp womp. So Bastian's dead before being able to do much. And a nice upside down picture of some fish. And lots more killing. More upside down pictures of fish. So they've basically cleared out my centre and pick up 4 points. Turn 2. And I've got some more Annihilators down. But they're not going to accomplish much really, because I think it's pretty much over at this stage. I lost the centre, lost all those units in the middle there. And I've barely got anything left, so it's just a mopping up exercise now. For the Deepkin, I've got Annihilators over there who failed their charge, because it's 9 inches, so you can't expect to make them all. So what could I have done different there? Well, since I went first, I could have not gone so close to the enemy, knowing that they might get a double and kill everything. I could have spread out at the back more, and even then though, I think the ranged units here could have popped in front of me even and still shot down the heroes. So it's a tricky one, but it's pretty much lost from here, as you can see. Not much left, and I can't even do much in that turn. I was able to get 1 point by the looks of it, but I've just barely got any models left at this stage. Everything got eaten by the fish, and couldn't do an eye for an eye because I failed to kill a unit. And on to turn 3 for the Deepkin. They're going to murder more of my stuff, shoot more of my stuff. They don't have a lot of mortal wound output, the Deepkin, but they do have a lot of attacks, and they can put a lot of rend on them. And I was noticing that there was an awful lot of times where there was a huge handful of dice coming down, and they were hitting on 2s, wounding on 2s. And at worst, it would be like 2s and 3s, or 3s and 2s, but there was quite a bit of 2s and 2s in there with the buffs they've got going on. And it's very nasty. And they often have some rend in there, so just weight of attacks, they were taking things down. So yeah, dead annihilators, dead almost everything. And is everything dead by this point? I think it is. Yes. So, moving on to the next game. Well, what did I learn from that? If you're going first, maybe don't leave yourself in a position to... I suppose it's a general lesson. It may not have applied to that game specifically, but if you're going first, you could get doubled next, so don't put yourself in a position where being doubled would be fatal, which I might have done, but I think the units I was up against were fast enough and with the teleporty enough ability that I could have been killed either way, even if I had been a bit more defensive. But so far, up to and including this game, I think I'm not thinking as much about the scenario as I maybe could do, and I'm focusing more on killing things. So I've got these hammer annihilators, these just ultimate death machines that drop down, murder something, and then get killed. And I'm kind of hyper-focused in on that. So this game here is it's a very interesting list. This is the spare player list that I'm against in this round. And I can tell you what's in it. So, the scenario as well. I will just find that in the book here. In ye olde, or I suppose it is getting quite old now. So I think this is the Nidus Paths scenario, which is a very interesting deployment map. And you can see that the deployment is kind of, it's like kind of a jagged line down the middle there diagonally. So my opponent's army in that corner, mine in this corner, and my opponent, who was one of the spare players, was very kindly giving me some tips during this game as well, since this is my first competitive singles tournament for this game. I've only really played Age of Sigmar sporadically for however many years since it was released now, so it's gone through multiple editions. I probably played the most games in the first edition. I'm not even sure how many games did I play in second edition. It must have been less than 5, surely. It was a very dark period for Age of Sigmar in my life, so not many during second edition. And during this one, obviously, I'm back on the bandwagon. So I was getting some helpful tips on deployment and what to worry about in opposing armies when you don't know what they do. Because obviously, it's one of those games where you can never be 100% sure what something does just by looking at the model. And even if you ask your opponent, you're not going to remember it all, because some of them have got multiple paragraphs of special rules, and that's just for each model. So you're not going to remember until it's killed you multiple times and you remember how it killed you. Let's see, Daniel says, I see bones are thrown in honour of grave gods of chance. I don't know, is that a thing? I don't know what you're referring to there. So, this list I'm up against contains, well, it's a Tzeentch army, it's Eternal Conflagration, Kairos Fateweaver is in there, who is well known for being able to change a dice to whatever he wants, and also have some dice that can just be used in place of actually rolling the dice. You can just say, nope, it's this one. There is a Fate Master. There are 3 units of Flamers, 2 units of 6, and 1 unit of 3. There is the Kronspine Incarnate of Gur, and the Purple Sun as an endless spell. So the Kronspine, I've learned, is an interesting thing that you can't just outright kill in a turn. You can just reduce its power level until it hits 0 and then it dies. And you only test for reducing its power level at the end of the turn. So it's going to take you a while to kill it, and it can actually grow in power level as well if it kills things like monsters. So, very interesting mechanic for that. Unique. Purple Sun, of course, well known at the moment for being very powerful, for adding to the rend, taking away armour basically of nearby enemy units, which is pretty bad for Stormcast, obviously. And in addition to that, it'll also just eat something if you roll a 1 and are near it. So whatever it is, I don't know if any models are immune to the purple sun. Are some models immune to just being removed? I'm not sure if Gargants have something like that. Maybe Marathi or Gotrek. I don't know how it interacts with them. I haven't seen it in action. But most things it can just eat if a 1 is rolled on a dice, which is very powerful, and it's only 70 points. But obviously you need someone to cast it, you need to successfully cast it, and you need to get it in the right place. So, very powerful. Okay, so this scenario, let's have a look. So, there is a teleporter in the corner of this scenario. So if you're in that corner, you can jump over there. If you're in that corner, you can jump over there. Diagonally across the table. So my opponent has put 3 flamers in that corner, hoping to teleport them if I leave a space open. So the liberators are kind of trailing back, meaning that they can't teleport into the corner. We've got liberators here going for this objective. We've got concussors there who can maybe go for that objective, but they don't want to get spined to death. We've got the long strikes here, ready to shoot. We've got my heroes. So we're outside of the threat range of the flamers, which was actually a piece of advice from my opponent. Because I was thinking just get things as close as possible. If it's not shooty stuff, just put my fighty things on the front line, try and get in there early. But really, my opponent was going to be able to choose to go first or second. So they could just choose to go first and just shoot things to death. And I was thinking, well, if I go first, if I'm made to go first and I haven't got anything in range to actually do anything, then isn't it just kind of a wasted turn? And maybe, but I can get to an objective or two, score some points, and I can always plop down Annihilators in turn 1 as well then, before my opponent's had a chance to do anything or cast any spells. So, I've got all my Annihilators and Bastian off the table this time, because Bastian would like to teleport behind enemy lines or just between enemy units, get the charge in on somebody. And you can see that my opponent has also got, who was that? So that's the Fate Master there, who appears to have a German flag painted on his wings. Okay, so there's the Kronspine, and there's the Purple Sun ready to roll, and also some Summonables if they get to do anything in this game. Turn 1, so it looks like my opponent gives it to me, so not much going on here. There is some wounding being taken place here, so that'll be from Annihilators plopping down. So I decide to bring all my Annihilators down at once, and Bastian. So my thinking is that if I don't do that, they can walk forward, shoot everything down, and then if I bring them down one at a time, they're going to be eating and unleash hell. Which means that if it's these Grandhammer Annihilators, they could all just die to unleash hell from one of these units. So I'd rather bring them all down, charge in Bastian first, eat the unleash hell with him, because he's got a ward save, he's probably not going to die, then charge the Annihilators in. And I'm also splashing out the mortal wounds more with more units down. So Grandhammer's there, Shield Annihilators there, Bastian there. Liberators heading into that objective. However, you may notice none of them are in combat. That's because all of them failed their charges. So these ones failed a rerollable 7, which then blocked in this unit a bit. So they would have needed a bigger charge to actually get round the unit. These guys failed, rerollable. All these ones are rerollable, and they all failed twice. Bastian failed twice as well, because he used a command point to make his rerollable. So 9 failed, 7 failed, and then whatever they needed failed twice as well. So nobody got into combat, and they're all sitting ducks waiting to be flamed to death when they could potentially get doubled. I did get all my points though. Battle tactic, can't remember what it was, probably just holding an objective. Just a simple one. Another one that's easy for me to do is going through breaking enemy lines, something like that. Barge through enemy lines, having 2 units in the opponent's territory. Very easy with teleporting, of course. So Kairos decides to run away from that area, comes down here, wants this objective by the looks of it, wants to eat people on the way. And the Fate Master and the Flamers are just running away. So they can run away a bit, shoot, And then if they get the double turn, they can run away even further, meaning that the charges are going to be very difficult next turn again. So potentially all those failed charges could come back to bite me here. You can see 3 Annihilators are already shot down. This one's wounded. I put all out defense on them, so they obviously start shooting at the other unit. Shield Annihilator's not dead. My opponent only gets 4 points because I think I'm just sitting on a lot of the objectives, am I? Which makes it difficult to take some of them. That could be the case. So, turn 2, and my opponent does get the double turn, which is very bad. So, obviously, I set myself up knowing that a double turn could be bad if none of the charges were successful. But you can't just not do charges because they might not work. Obviously, I had the option to just bring these Annihilators down one at a time, but I described my reasoning with the Unleash Hell and all that malarkey, and having to only face it once if you send them all in together, and just going for like the ultimate crunch before they could shoot. But alas, that's not worked, and now sitting ducks. And of course, if you only bring down a small number of units, if you do get doubled, that's less of your units that can be destroyed, and there are still some of them in reserve waiting for potentially a double up against you. Daniel says, all these minis, beautiful paint jobs. Well, I'm going to assume that you're also talking about mine, not just the enemies, so thank you. Kronspine is making his way into the fight by the looks of it. That's a bit scary. And the Purple Sun is going after Bastian and does not suck him into the sun this time round, which is nice. You can usually tell in the event hall when somebody has Purple Sunned a particularly powerful unit off the table, because there is usually a loud cry of joy or anguish from somewhere, and that usually signifies the Purple Sun. So all the Annihilators are dead, they've got flamed off, and I think the Shield Annihilators are dead as well. Kronspine gets into the long strikes, so they're also dead, and Kairos into Annihilators, and it's basically game over at this point, because I've lost all the Annihilators without accomplishing anything. So that's most of my army dead without striking a blow, and Bastian is really far away from them as well after that double turn. So failing every single charge. Of course, remember, it's not guaranteed that even the rerollable 7 would make it in, because if I, for example, failed the first one and then rolled the second, it's entirely possible that Kairos would decide to just change that one of the dice to a 1. So I might still not make it anyway, but you're still hoping. And then you'd hope that one of the rerollable 9s would make it in, though. You would think out of those 4 rolls that one of them would be 9 or more. That's not too much to ask, but sadly no. And now all the Annihilators are dead. So we've got Concussors into the Kronspine down there. And I am winning on points though, but it's not going to help. So Concussors and the Kronspine do knock it down a level. Bastian running away from the Purple Sun. All those Liberators are killed by Kairos. And oh, what's that? Purple Sun chasing after Bastian, and then rolls a 1. And he's eaten by the sun. You flew too close to the sun, Bastian, and it's purple time. Dead. So if it wasn't already over, it definitely is now. And Kairos is just chilling. Kronspine can't just kill it outright in one go, so it's going to be fine for the moment. Kills a Concussor. I do pick up some more points, so I'm technically winning. Some Liberators in the Kronspine. Having a merry old time. But it's not looking good, is it? So, yeah, they're all dead now. And, yeah, so my opponent was able to pick up a lot of points at the end of the game there. And because I only got 1 right there, it was enough for the win. And that's the end of that. So, what did I learn from that? Well, did I lose that because I made terrible tactical blunders? Maybe. What could I have done differently? Did all the Annihilators need to come down at once? Obviously not, but was it a decent strategy? Maybe. okay, what was bad, first of all, was putting the Annihilators behind each other, assuming that the first unit would definitely make their charge, because then the other one was blocked. So that's bad. Won't do that again. Bastian being out here. Bad. Probably should have put him in the middle, because then whatever happens, he's going to be able to go and fight somebody. Over here, they only have to abandon one objective. And what's Bastian going to do? Just sit on one objective on his own when everyone else is dying. Not healthy for him. So putting him somewhere towards the middle so he's got options of where to go and who to chase would maybe have been a good idea. So learning experience and also learning about the spells and the abilities that some of the enemies have. Learning that Purple Sun is terrifying, obviously. And yeah, it's just a matter of being killed by things repeatedly until it's just automatic to you. You look at a unit and you think, okay, this is roughly how far I need to be away from it. That's an ability I need to be aware of. I better make sure I've got an unbind saved for that, and so on. Daniel says, strategy is mostly good to my eyes, but then I am a complete idiot with strategies. Well, I'm not sure that the value of your eyes is very high then. If you're a self-proclaimed complete idiot. I'm sure you're exaggerating, though. I'm sure you're a veteran of many a battle, and have probably won some of them. So, the next game, as I've now won 1 and lost 2. Silk Steel Nests, and I actually took a picture of the book this time. This is going to be an exciting one, isn't it? So, 8 objectives, and with this one, from turn 2 onwards, if you are controlling an objective on your opponent's half of the table, if you're right on it at the end of the turn, then you can burn it away and get an extra victory point, but then obviously it can't be controlled after that. So it's just gone. So if you do it too soon, you might have too few objectives to control. If you do it too late, you won't be able to burn them all in time. So in this one, let's just grab my opponent's list here for round 4. So this is on to day 2 now, so this was today, so I should have an immaculate, spotless memory of these games. So this is Soulblight Gravelords from the Castelli dynasty. And the main event here is Neferata. There is a Vampire Lord who is down here. There is a Vengorian Lord, which I think is this weird bat mutant thing there. Battle line, 10 Blood Knights. Horrifying, you don't want to get charged by them. 5 Blood Knights here, 20 Dire Wolves there, 20 Graveguard, and I think are there some skeletons as well in there? Yeah, 10 Death Rattle skeletons at the front. So, the advice that I was picking up from the day prior is that I don't need to hold all the objectives. I should just focus in on how I'm going to win the game and try to accomplish that, rather than trying to either get all the objectives or just kill everything. Just think about how I'm going to win. And in this game, looking at it, I thought, you know what? That force there is actually very manageable. Graveguard will hit hard. Blood Knights will hit hard if they charge, but they can't really guarantee they're going to charge when I've got teleporting units that can just be 7 inches away from them, so I can prevent that. And I'll also be quite a distance away from all this, including probably the scariest thing, 10 Blood Knights. Obviously Neferata and this thing are pretty scary, but Blood Knights, pretty terrifying when they charge. So apparently it's extra damage when they charge is their special thing, the Blood Knights, so very scary. And what I want to do here, because you can see I've got, hold on, so Bastian isn't there because I've got Bastian off the table. I've got all the Annihilators off the table. I've got my long strikes in this hut. Got some Liberators there skirting the objectives. Another one skirting the objectives. And my heroes at the back there. I don't know if they're in range to do any dispelling yet, but I'm not that worried about that at this stage. The Concussor's here. And my plan is to just focus on this half of the board, because I think I can beat that force. If I put all my army into it and kill it, then I'm facing a much simpler battle after that. And try to rack up points. So, in the heavens, very, very scary prospect. Lots of Annihilators and Bastian. And if I keep him safe, bring down 1 unit a turn, let's see how it goes. And of course Bastian can just come down any time because he can't benefit from the 7 inches anyway. You'll also notice there are grave markers. This is where undead units in this game can be summoned. So one right in the left hand corner, one in the right hand corner as I look at it. So if I leave these areas open, then units that I've killed can potentially be resurrected in that spot. So very, very nice models. I like these new Blood Knights. I liked the old Blood Knights as well, to be fair. So the wolves are not very good, obviously, but there's lots of them, and they'll be great for objectives. And Graveguard, very scary when they hit. So, let's see. It looks like I am going first. Or, yes. So, battle tactic. Against the odds, pick one unit from your starting army battlefield and this turn if they're controlling an objective. So yeah, it's just an easy one to start with. So I'm just going to sit here. I'm not planning to advance too far forward here. I'm going to put my hard-hitting stuff behind the enemy and leave everything else back so it doesn't get killed. So I've got Bastian there who wanted to charge into the Graveguard, and I've got the Annihilators down. They landed round here somewhere and then charged into the Blood Knights. Killed 2 of them, which is good. And they don't lose any Annihilators in response. They do take a wound or 2, but they're not dead, which is good. So it stops the Blood Knights from charging, and I'm in amongst the enemy already. Bastian failed his charge, though, with the rerollable 9. So I'm going to pick up 4 points, because I don't have more objectives than my opponent yet. Because look at that, they've got a lot of models on them. So it was never going to be a thing I could do at that point. And this one is the proving ground, by the way, as denoted by that. So my opponent must have had fewer drops than me because he forced me to go first. So, Grave Lords, first turn. Against the odds, easy enough. The wolves start to work their way towards this objective, which is a nice easy one. These Blood Knights are going to head towards the action. These ones do kill off 2 of the Annihilators, who then smacks down another one. So the Annihilators have kind of done their job there. These guys are heading in this direction, so they're a little bit further away from Bastian. The skeletons are blocking off the path to the Graveguard, if I wanted to get through here to charge them, for example. So 5 points are picked up because my opponent does have more objectives than I do, which isn't difficult at this stage. So I decide barge through enemy lines. It's a good time to use that in turn 2. I do get to go first in this round, and that means that if I just teleport units in, I'm easily going to get that if they don't get killed. So the first thing I do, because I moved Bastian towards the enemy behind, then the skeletons, I think, redeployed up here. And that was blocking off the concussors getting past to charge into the Graveguard. So I had to shoot down the skeletons with everything, all my shooting capability, shot down the skeletons, then the concussors were able to charge through into the Graveguard and the Vampire Lord. Bastian made his way in, smashed all the Graveguard into tiny pieces. The ones that were left got killed by the concussors. Or Battle Shock. I think Battle Shock made the last couple of them run away because it was impossible for them to succeed because so many had died, and the Vampire Lord there is wounded as well. The final Annihilator here killed off those Blood Knights because they did suffer some mortal wounds as well, I think, when this unit dropped in, who also then killed the Lord there, which took, I'm pretty sure, when Bastian decided to use his lightning down from the heavens, he put something like 5 wounds onto a 10 wound model, something really ridiculous like that, onto the, what's that thing called? Vengorian Lord, which was there. So then the Annihilators were able to put mortal wounds on it, more mortal wounds charging in, and then just smashed it to 1,000,000 pieces, and Neferata is now left alone there. So obviously those Annihilators are prime candidates for getting killed by Blood Knights, but I've got rid of something really spicy there. And I'm claiming some serious territory here and picking up points, and I've killed stuff. And these Annihilators are crucially still alive, meaning that they have to tie up an enemy unit to make sure I'm not going to rally them back. They want to kill off the final model there. And juicy. So I get 5 points, maximum points that round, because I was able to spread out onto the objectives, and my opponent's turn 2. The dire wolves aren't interested in a fight, they just want to spread out and touch objectives and take those to get maximum points. The Blood Knights move towards the Annihilators, who redeploy further away, because obviously you don't want to get charged by Blood Knights, so I thought that was worthy use of a command point, and I think they redeployed 5 inches further, which means the charge is actually fairly difficult now. So that was nice. And Neferata is probably eyeing up killing this Annihilator. And yep, there you go. So the Blood Knights do fail their charge, which is great because these Annihilators are still alive. Blood Knights do all their damage on the charge, and now the Annihilators could charge them and do the mortal wounds on the charge and also get to hit them first. And when they're hit back, it's not going to be as devastating because they don't get their charge bonus. And Bastian's right here, the Concussor's right here. I can kill the... I would hope to shoot down the Vampire Lord and then charge things into Neferata, which would leave me mainly with these 2 big blocks to deal with. Daniel says, typical, here I am enjoying a battle report and suddenly I must go make pancakes. You must make pancakes, is that so? Well, I'm sure you'll watch the rest of it later. Enjoy your pancakes. So I don't really need to deal with these wolves particularly, because they're not attacking me. All they're doing is sitting on some objectives, which I don't need all the objectives, obviously. So the Blood Knights filling that charge is a big deal. Next turn, my opponent gets the priority roll. So, as you can see, the plan for the Annihilators to run away and then deny the Blood Knights their charge bonus from having the next turn didn't work out because I didn't win the priority roll, but it would have been nice. So all the Annihilators are dead now in there. This guy's still alive. But Bastian, untouched. Concussor's untouched. And I've got some more Annihilators in the heavens as well, some shield Annihilators. So, rather than just ploughing everyone into the Blood Knights, what is my plan here? Because I could have a double turn coming up, and that would be very nice, wouldn't it? Since my opponent's just got a double here, I could have a double. So, I want to get everyone in and kill Neferata. I would then like very much not to be attacked by Blood Knights, so if I got the double, I could then get a charge in on them as well. I would rather delay bringing them into combat because they're very nasty. My shield Annihilators, I could bring them down, do some mortal wounds, then kamikaze into Blood Knights. I don't like the sound of that at all. So what I'm actually going to do with the Annihilators is bring them down into this area and just claim this objective. So I would have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 because I can move more of my models into this one. So I can take 5 of the objectives, so I can have more than my opponent. Another option for the Annihilators would have been to bring them down somewhere and charge into the dire wolves with them. Wouldn't have killed all of them though. I think there's about 40 wounds there, so it would have taken a long time to chew through that. So my opponent is racking up maximum points for now. And in my turn 3, so the Concussors charge into Neferata. Bastian does not succeed with his charge at Neferata, sadly. So Neferata is alive, one of the Concussors is dead, but the Blood Knights are still out of combat. I move more of my models into this zone to control this objective from the dire wolves. Because remember, Liberators are worth 3 each, so are the dire wolves. The long strikes are not, so one of them had to dip their toe in to help out. These heroes are just hanging back a bit. This guy, Lord Imperator, can just charge in willy-nilly now because I don't need his 7-inch ability. Did I even take a picture of the Annihilators? Oh yeah, there they are. So they're just chilling in this zone, and they got close enough to do some mortal wounds to the Blood Knights, but they're defending this objective now. And the next turn, so I think I do get the double now, which means that Bastian can charge in to the Blood Knights. Neferata is killed, doesn't get a chance to escape and survive. Bastian with all-out attack on the Blood Knights, they're very survivable though. And the long strikes, I think it was the long strikes and other shooting attacks that killed Neferata. I think Bastian may have done some mortal wounds with his lightning attack as well. So Neferata's dead, Bastian charges the Blood Knights. And the worst thing about Bastian, from my opponent's perspective here, is that the Blood Knights, without the charge, are very, very unlikely to kill Bastian. It's very, very difficult. They can't fit that many of them into combat. And they don't have a vast amount of rend, actually. They get a lot of bonuses on the charge. They're much more powerful on the charge, I think. So Bastian is unlikely to get killed by them. They can escape from him, but then he can just keep chasing them, hopefully. And if they run away and then get a double, they could charge into somebody. But if they don't get a double, he can just keep going after them and preventing them from charging. So, and on average, you can't expect to get double turns just based on the maths, dude. Even though double turns do tend to happen at least once a game in my experience. So it's looking good for me. And I picked up some more juicy points there. I can't remember which battle tactic I chose exactly. But in my opponent's next turn, I finest our Bastian in case they decide to attack him. So we would get the extra save. And some more wolves are shuffled into the zone, I think. The Blood Knights run away, hoping to get the double turn so they can charge somebody. There's the wolves, and they're set up, so they burn this objective as well to get a point. Bonus point. So, 5 more. So you can see, my opponent has racked up a lot of points, although the grand strategy is definitely going to be mine, because I'm going to be able to get enough units in this area. Because I've got the Imperatant down there as well who can join in. My opponent's probably not getting a grand strategy, which is also take what's theirs, I think. And yeah, I'm running out of battle tactics that I can realistically achieve at this stage. Because some of them rely on, like there's one that's Galatian Veterans, killing an enemy Galatian Veterans unit. I'm never going to do that with my Liberators, really. And moving on to the next turn, so I think I get turn 5. I decide all the Liberators are going to try and kill the Dire Wolves, because why not? It's a long shot, but it's worth a go. Bastian goes into the Blood Knights again. It kills some more. And everyone else just spreads out onto the objectives to burn them. So, oh, by the way, in the previous turn, one of the objectives was burned as well by me, because we checked the rules to figure out when the burning actually took place and how many you can do, and you can only do 1 per turn. So one of them was already burned off previously, and then this one, I think this one was burned off the previous turn, this one was burned off in this turn. So I've burned off 2 objectives now. And there we go. So that's going to be the end, because in my opponent's turn, all he can really do is just try and kill Bastian fruitlessly, and try and kill Liberators fruitlessly. So, scored quite a few points until the end when he was running out of units. I got my grand strategy, so it's another win. Woohoo! So that's how it looks at the end. Blood Knights were pretty much neutralised. They did kill some Annihilators, but then Bastian just tied them up the rest of the time. I think my strategy of focusing everything in on this area was successful. And then precision scalpel-like strikes with the Annihilators coming down and targeting a specific thing worked out nicely in this one. I was able to kill the, forgotten its name again, Vengorian Lord. And the Blood Knights there did end up dying as a result of the Annihilators, even though it wasn't all on the turn that they came down. Bastian did a nice job, killed lots of Graveguard. So that's another win. 2 wins, 2 losses, heading into the final round. And this is one of the pre-tournament favourites I'm going to be up against in this one. And it's Lumineth, who I've never played against before. They've got a lot of rules, they've got a lot of weird tricks that I was unaware of, but I was made aware of them beforehand. So I wasn't really going into it totally blind. I was getting advice from some people on how to deal with Lumineth as well. So, the gist of it is, you've got Teclis, and he can just do 1,000,000 spells, most of which he can't do anything about. He can then have a wall. He's got a wall of sentinels in front of him, who are the archers, who can have very long, you can have their range boosted by a spell. They can be re-rolling to hit with a spell. They don't need line of sight, and they can do mortal wounds on 5s. These combat units here, the Wardens, They can all do mortal wounds on a 5 in combat as well, with a bit of a spell on them. There's a spell portal, so spells can have a longer range. There's life swarm spell, so healing ability. There's an enlightener, who we'll get to him in a minute, but I'm also going to talk a little bit about abilities that just seem like complete nonsense, and I would even put Bastian's somewhere on the nonsense scale, his ability to just get all his wounds back when he kills a model. It's what I would call like a feel-bad rule, where you're just kind of undoing something that your opponent's done. Something they've accomplished is now just meaningless. Other things that I would put in that category would be, I point at a unit, now they're not allowed to do anything for the turn. I'd call that a feel-bad rule. And this game does have quite a few of them in it. Age of Sigmar does have a fair few feel-bad rules. But not all of them, of course. Overall, I would say a character like Bastian, if you want him to be super survivable, give him more wounds rather than the ability to just get them all back. And I think that would leave a better taste in people's mouths, rather than him just regenerating all of his wounds when killing one model. There are other ways to go about it, rather than with a feel-bad rule, in my opinion. So we'll get to that later, because the Enlightener does have a rule that falls into that category that will come up during this game. So there's teleporting ability with a spell as well. So from what I understood, there isn't really anywhere you can hide from this army. Initially, there is, because they don't want to deploy further out from the corner while there's a threat of 3 Annihilator units and Bastian teleporting down around them. Which makes perfect logical sense. There's no point leaving gaps, and if they can still score points without coming out, then why bother? So let's have a look how it starts. So this is close to the chest. Weird deployment again. So the territory, you can see the territory, but then there's also the you can't deploy within 9 of the enemy's territory. So really they should draw the deployment on there as well, marked out clearly, because it's really weird. So the place you can deploy is like that. So it's like a smaller version of the shape that you see there. So really bizarre. And I think they could do with just overhauling the way these maps work entirely, to be honest. Maybe even putting distances on them. Wouldn't that be wild? And in this one, you score objectives in the normal way, but there's also an alpha objective, which if you get that one, you get an extra point for it. So what's my plan? Well, I don't really want to do too much attacking into this wall of death, because there's so many mortal wounds coming out of it that I'm not going to survive. But look at the paint jobs though. That's obviously a redeeming quality for the Lumineth when they're painted this well. They are extremely nice models, especially this Techless, which has clearly been put on a big custom made base here. Very nice though. Oh, you can see that instantly in turn 1 the long strikes are dead. Shot down with boosted range sentinels. So yeah, that was turn 1. And my turn 1 against the odds, so I just want to hold an objective. I do bring down some Annihilators and kill off the Wardens that had dared to move away from the bubble down here, so they're all dead. Annihilators killed them. That's a good job. What's my plan though? Don't want to dive into that wall, so what I'm going to do is spread out units into objective areas and just try and pick up points throughout the game and hope that's enough. And then if my opponent wants to come out and fight, that may leave gaps for me to exploit either with teleporting or just with plain old movement. But as I find out, there are spells available, which some of which can't be stopped at all, that include things like taking a bravery test or you can't move, combined with another spell that reduces your bravery by 2, which means that it's difficult. And yeah, there's about 25 spells I think Techless has access to, which I think is probably too many. I can understand the lore behind it. Techless is like the ultimate magic dude, as it were. But I also think it's a lot of rules for anyone to know. Next. So, plenty of points won so far. There is a bit of shuffling going on though with the Lumineth. They do move out a little bit to affect the ranges of various abilities. The Concussors aren't allowed to move without taking a bravery test, and all the Annihilators are shot down there. which says to me a unit is going to be deleted from shooting per turn. And I can just budget for that and just try and score points, knowing that one unit will just be deleted each time. So they're dead. And onto my turn. So I brought down more Annihilators and thought, you know what? The amount of units I have, I can't leave them up in the heavens forever. I'll bring down a unit, see if I can accomplish anything, make a dent in this wall. Because if I can kill some of them, then maybe it'll open up the possibility for another unit to get in there. If I can just get in there, kill, let's say I killed 6. They're spreading out across the whole frontage would be a bit more difficult for them, especially when they have to start to move out later on for objective purposes. So if I could kill a few, that would be nice, but unfortunately, went in there, took some Unleash Hell from a few of the Sentinels, not all of them obviously because there's limited range on a model by model basis, lost some of them to that, and then the rest of them were just killed by mortal wounds, and I didn't actually do that many wounds myself. I killed a few, but not a huge amount, so what I've learned from that is don't bother attacking the Lumineth when they're in this formation at all, just stay away. And preferably have something to shoot them with, because combat is very fruitless here. Obviously, if you charge in multiple units at a time, you may say, why not do that? My logic was, while I would only suffer one lot of Unleash Hell, the Unleash Hell is doing just endless mortal wounds anyway, so even Bastian would be at risk against that. He'd have a good chance at surviving, but then, when you get there, I'd only be fighting with one unit first, 3 models maybe, and then that entire unit, that entire wall of mortal wounding on 5s or 6s, of ultimate death, would then be able to attack all my other units that went in on the line at once. So they may well wipe all of them out before they get to strike. So I'd be sacrificing 3 or 4 units to let one of my units fight, was my logic. So that's why I didn't go for that. If I could go back and do something different, I wouldn't even bother sending the Annihilators in there. I would have just kept them somewhere else until my opponent comes out of it or has to shoot them off, which means they're not shooting something else that turn. So turn 3, I have to bring everything down now. So Bastian and the Shield Annihilators go onto that one, and I've just spread out my Liberators just to hold objectives, just like it. Here I am, I'm on all the objectives, come and get me if you want your points, is what I'm saying now. So I'm scoring quite well, but at this point I've now run out of battle tactics that I can achieve without killing anything. And I'm not going to kill any more units. So, barge through enemy lines is what I achieved there. Onto my opponent's turn, and is everyone going to start moving yet? Yes, they are, look at that. So, the Wardens have come forward, the Sentinels behind tech lists, and the Wardens want to make a long charge into the Dracoths. Which they do. I think they got 11 inches. All the Shield Annihilators are shot down by the Sentinels. In one go, of course. One of the Concussors is dead, but not both. One's still chilling. And, okay, look at this. Techless charged into Bastian, who's behind that mushroom. The Enlightened, or the Enlightener. So his ridiculous rule is that he can just pick an enemy hero nearby and say, hey you're only allowed to fight me. To which Bastian replies, but you're not in range of me. To which the Enlightener replies, yes, that's the point, ha ha ha. So Bastian just isn't allowed to fight anybody that isn't that thing that he can't fight. Which means Bastian isn't allowed to fight anybody until he chases that thing down. But since he's already in combat, unless I have a double turn coming up, then to get to him I would have to very slowly pile in around Techless, which he could just then run away on his turn. So yeah, not a big fan of that particular rule, as you may have guessed. And points racked up, my opponent is now holding this objective, which I believe I made into the Alpha objective, because whichever one I pick really, it was in danger, because any of these units could be teleported anywhere on the battlefield. So they could maybe be teleported over there and then have a charge into him, or then maybe they could even be teleported here. There may be a space they could fit in there. So, on my next turn, I decide, let's bring the Liberators in. Let's try and just kill off this unit. Liberators and the Incanter all go in there. Don't manage to kill them, though. So, like I said, I'm running out of battle tactics I can achieve. Can't kill them, lose a Concussor. Bastian piling in slowly towards this guy, but can't get close enough to him. So, Bastian's going to be stuck there forever, really. And some Liberators are dying, not winning this fight. Not going well at all. In my opponent's turn, now most things are still alive, starting to spread out and pick up points. Starting to murder. And I do bring out some new Liberators after this unit is killed off, behind the Lord Imperatant over there. Teclis boosts his movement to 48 inches, which is just a thing he can do. And he then heads over here to... I don't think he shoots them because he was retreating from combat. A 48-inch retreat from combat move he used. And that leaves Bastian with Sentinels, which he also can't fight because this guy is still taunting him. So this is the only thing Bastian's allowed to fight for the rest of the game, and he can't reach him. Sentinels, not Sentinels, Liberators are shot down, and Imperatant is surrounded. The Liberators have died again, and it's not looking good. Imperatant's still alive. Bastian is surrounded by Sentinels now, so he's stuck in there forever, and he is unwilling to fight any of them because the person he really wants to fight is over there. So he's so angry at this Enlightener that he can't bring himself to swing his hammer at anybody else to try and reach him. He can just bring himself to sit there on the ground and slowly take a wound every turn from this mob until they just decide they want to walk away, and then he can go for the thing he wants to fight. Which, spoiler alert, is not going to happen. So running out of models, just as a last why not, decided to charge things into Teclis. Look at that. So the last couple of turns I was just running out of battle tactics I could achieve and didn't have any objectives, didn't have units to contest them. So just running out of points. And my opponent managed to kill everything, and including Bastian with spells as well. And then spread out onto the objectives. So I did get some close-ups though of Teclis because this is a ridiculously nice paint job here, and just build as well. Look at those cats. And this army here did actually win Coolest Army Award as well, which is richly deserved. So lots of points being racked up at the end. I didn't rack up any at the end at all. So you can see I was in the lead for a while, and then it slowly tapered off. So what could I have done differently in this game? Other than it just being a bad matchup, because my whole thing is coming down and then getting into combat. And coming down and getting into combat against this army is just a terrible idea, as I found out. What would you have done differently? Obviously, the one thing that I know is the Annihilators. I wouldn't have just brought them in here and charged into the Wall of Death, but you've kind of got to do it once before you know how good it is. Because not only were they dishing out all the mortal wounds on the Unleash Hell and then in combat, there was also like a mortal wound grenade that the champion can just lob at you. So mortal wounds are the Stormcast's bane, and there was a lot of mortal wounds being thrown out on 5s during this game. So I did have my ward saves of 6 from being within 12 inches, wholly within 12 of an objective, but that didn't really help me too much. So let me know what you would have done differently against these Lumineth, because I may have to face them again at some point in the future. Maybe they'll have a new book though, and maybe they won't be able to use exactly the same techniques. So looking at this setup here, would you have deployed differently? Would you have attempted to tackle this army in any kind of different manner? One thing immediately that I'm looking at here is, hold on, let's see. So I didn't go first, and by the time I did get to go, this unit was no longer a viable charge option because they were only spread out like that to take this objective, and then as soon as that was taken, they could just withdraw back into their shell. Because if I was able to attack them when they're like this, obviously I could plop down here, charge in, not get Unleashed Hell, but I wouldn't get to go first because I've got a lot of drops. So would I because it's only one drop, this army. Could I fit my whole army into one drop? Would I want to? Is there any other way of tackling this Lumineth list? What do you think? I'd be very interested to know. Or just lists like this in general, where it's like an impenetrable wall with all the stuff you want to kill is at the back that you can't physically reach, other than shooting it. How would you tackle it on this scenario? Because I thought I was doing alright racking up points, but because I couldn't kill things throughout the game, because there was just nothing that was available to be killed, that locks out a lot of the battle tactics for me. So I feel like I achieved all the battle tactics I could do. Early on I could have risked one of the killy battle tactics on killing this unit with Annihilators, but I only just killed them. I got the exact number of wounds I needed to kill them, so it was a chance I could have wasted a battle tactic there if they hadn't died. But realistically, that was the only unit I was ever going to kill during this game. And yes, it's not disheartening though, it's more educational in terms of my own list building and the kind of thing you can come up against in this game. Because every army has different unique ways of approaching a battle, and it's just learning about all those and figuring out what you're likely to face, how it works, what you can do up against it, what you need to have in your army to counter certain things. On this particular scenario as well, none of my casters were able to deploy close enough to dispel anything that the enemy were doing, and if they had deployed any closer, they would have been immediately shot, I'm sure. So could I have just put everything right on the edge of deployment and just thrown everything into the enemy in a big wall? Could I have just plopped down all the Annihilators at once, everything else behind them, just run into that wall of spears and guns and been mortally wounded to death, and maybe scored no points throughout the whole game? I don't know. Very interested to hear the audience feedback on mainly this game, because it's so interesting, the impenetrable nature, seemingly, of this army. How would you tackle that? Because, as far as I'm aware, Lumineth don't just completely sweep every single tournament, so there must be ways of dealing with them. Is it just shooting? Is that the only way to get through this? Having some really amazing shooting and getting rid of the annoying stuff from the back first? Is that the only way? Let me know. Anyway, this was a very good experience, this tournament. Lots of fun, and 5 good educational and friendly games as well. And I signed up for this one kind of short notice because there's another one I've signed up for at the end of this month, which is at Warhammer World, which I assume will have a lot of people in it. And I thought, you know what, I'll sign up for this one and maybe I can use it like a practice run to try a few things out. And what do I think is a weakness in my list, if it has one? Well, I'm sure it does have weaknesses. The shield Annihilators, I never really felt like they did anything to warrant their place in the list. I like them. I like the way they look. Would I have been better off with something... let's see, what could I fit in for the price of Annihilators? I could fit in some Prosecutors and Ether Wings, perhaps, which would be useful for hopping on objectives, and both of them are good for absorbing Unleash Hell, actually. But Unleash Hell, I didn't struggle with it that much in this event. It didn't completely destroy my army. And it's obviously a threat, though. And another thing you can do with those fast units is charge both ends of a line and make it more difficult for them to pile in. So there are things you can do. Let me know if you think there are any changes I could make. The spell options didn't really help me at all, the ones I chose. I could have picked different spells. Let me know which spells you think would be good in this list. Any different unit options you would like to see me try. And the next tournament is 2,000 points as well. Other options I have. I've got most of the older units, shall we say. I haven't got a lot of the newer ones painted. I have got, let's see, I've got Yndrasta, I've got the Knight Venator, I've got the Knight Azeros, Lord Veritant, the Lord Relictor, who's obviously very good, but would I be able to fit him in a list like this? I don't know. I've got Retributors, I've got Praetors, I've got... what else? I've got 3 Ballistas and a Lord Ordinator, who don't see much playtime at the moment from anybody, as far as I can tell. I've got Evocators, I've got a Lord Celestin on Drekov, Knight Heraldor, and if I want to, I could probably get Krondis ready in time for an event. Is that something to look into? There's a lot of points. I probably wouldn't be able to take Krondis and Bastian. That would be a bit excessive. So give me your feedback, basically. I'm new to the Age of Sigmar competitive scene, as you know. Give me advice, people. And with that, it's time to end this video. So before I go, don't forget to check out all the links in the description. There's a lot of social media shenanigans down there. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter. I've got Instagram. If that's not linked in there yet, then it's just Andy2D6 on Instagram. I have got... there's a Discord server in there as well, which is nice. And Facebook. And there's also Patreon and all that fundraising malarkey if you want to give me all your life savings to keep this channel afloat, to act as a beacon of hobby light and joy during these dark, turbulent times, to guide you away from the stormy seas of hobby misery towards hobby fulfillment and enjoyment. That's something you can do. Other than that, all that remains to be said is good night out there, whatever you are. Oh, and by the way, the army that won the tournament was the Deepkin that I played against during the event. And the winner of the coolest army was the Lumineth that I played against during this event. So, that's nice.